Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing what I've been up to in my own allotment, my own garden. And I've been doing this for over 30 years, but I still learn something every single day. Now, of course, it may not have gone beyond your notice that we've had a lot of warm weather over this last week here in the UK, and that has caused us a few problems. I say problems, it's part of the joys of growing your own food. I've also been setting up some new gadgets at the home plot, and I've got a bit of a discussion about weeds. So first of all, let's find out what's going on down on the allotment. Well, here I am on the allotment. It is Sunday morning, the 21st of June, and I'm down on the allotment really early this morning. It may not have gone beyond your notice that it has been rather warm here in the UK over the last few days. We've been getting some really hot, sunny weather. And one of the biggest risks that I find when it comes to being hot and sunny is that we could give ourselves sunstroke. I've given it to myself several times where I have just worked on in the heat of the day and tried to make it work, and I've ended up being rather ill because of it. So now, if I can help it, I will come to the allotment when it's hot, early in the morning or late in the evening when it's just that little bit cooler, and get on and do some work before heading home. Friday, however, I couldn't do that. I came down to the allotment about 10 o'clock in the morning and I stayed till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But what I did in counteract for that, and I recommend doing this anyway, is of course I put on some good sunscreen, made sure I had a hat, and just made sure I drank plenty of water. And I said every 10 minutes I was stopping and drinking some water. Thankfully, I didn't end up with sunstroke or make myself ill with doing that. Now, even though it is a bit cooler this morning, I'm still taking that same advice. Sunscreen, hat, plenty of liquids, and taking regular breaks when I feel I need to. I do think it is worth doing. Most importantly, of course, it means that we can also work in the garden, in the allotment, without making ourselves ill. So I'm imploring anybody that is listening, if it is hot, please do take precautions. Please do take precautions. It is not pleasant making yourself ill at all. So, what have we been doing here on the allotment? Well, Friday was basically a big clean-up. I have been feeling with the last few weeks where I've been so busy going to various events and projects going on at home that I just didn't give the allotment all the love and attention I felt it deserved. So I've been having a really big clean-up on Friday. Lots of weeds were pulled, grass trimmed and cut, lots of watering, of course. I have been trying to visit the allotment every evening, but I'm limited. It is a bit of a limiting time at the moment, and there's nothing worse when you're at work. It's hot all day, you just want to get home, don't you? I do make a point of still visiting the allotment even then, because if I'm hot and if I'm thirsty, my plants are going to be the same, but watering is a daily task at the moment. But yes, the straw on that front, the straw mulch is really working well at holding on to that moisture, reducing the amount of water loss to the environment. So I am definitely going to be using more of a straw mulch, ideally compost, but definitely a straw mulch if I have not got any compost. It's reduced that workload down. We've been harvesting a lot of our good vegetables, our good produce as well. We've been having some of our blackcurrants coming in from an area next to my neighbours, which I've spoken about before, a really difficult area to look after because it is vacated, and I've got a mass of weeds that I just cannot control because they're coming over from my neighbours. But we managed to get some blackcurrants from there. We've got some blackberries. Well, I think these are a blackberry hybrid. I've spoken about this before. I inherited this blackberry looking plant, and it produces some of the most sweetest blackberries ever. It's a thornless variety. I don't know if it is definitely a blackberry, but they look like blackberries. They're just very early on in the season, but they are delicious. Also, we've been getting cherries, which are also very welcome. But what I found with cherries, it's a case of really trying to get them when they are perfect. They ripen so quickly and then they go overripe really quickly as well. It's like literally one day they're perfect and the next day they're too ripe. So that's been a bit of a challenge, just trying to make sure I can pick cherries every single day and keep them going. What I have to do to keep up with all these harvests is when I go to work, I make sure I carry some plastic containers, Tupperware container type things, in my car so I can quickly harvest them on the way home from work. That way we've always got them supplied, ready to go into the kitchen. Same with all our soft fruits at the moment. Just got to make sure we have a constant supply of Tupperware containers ready to fill up. Rhubarb, of course, we've got gooseberries, we've got new potatoes and peas. Everything really is coming in at the moment. We're doing really, really well. But one of the major harvests, of course, is something that I've harvested this morning, are onions. These are our overwintered onions, not our spring sown onions, our overwintered onions. We've gone past the longest day now, that was yesterday. That means that our onions are not going to grow anymore. And I've decided just to get them up, we'll get them in the greenhouse drying, and there we go, we've got our onions for a few weeks now. We, of course, will be having our main crops coming in a little bit later on in the year, but for now, our overwintered onions, we got a decent amount as well. I'm very happy with what we got. I'm a little surprised, really, because it has been a dry spring. And, okay, they've not been the best onions, but what we have got, I am happy with. So, very happy with that, and everything is going into where it needs to go. It just goes to show that we are moving forward, and I think we spent so long thinking spring is here, we've got to plant, and now we're starting to reap the benefits of our planting. Now, with the onion bed empty, of course, that means that bed needs to be used for something. So what I did is I gave it a good hoe, and then I've sowed some carrot seeds in there just to try and make sure that we get carrots. This is a main crop variety I've used, and the plan is that this entire bed will just fill up with all these carrots. We'll use them for something, of course, in the kitchen, but it puts that bed to use. It means we are constantly filling up and using our beds as they become empty. And this is something that I think is so important, to make sure we never have empty beds, empty soil. And carrots are something that we can sow at this particular moment in time, so why not make the most of it? Right, well, it is time now to head on home and find out what we've been doing at home. But in the meantime, why don't you find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week? Well, I hope you're enjoying this podcast so far. If you are, then please do leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. Only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps us out and gets us found by more people. But also, if you are really enjoying this podcast and you want to help support the podcast and everything that goes with it, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. By being a member, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts, and each month you receive a copy of our mini newspaper, along with some seeds that you can sow in that very month. To be a member costs just £5 a month, which I think is an absolute bargain for everything that you are getting. But not only that, it does help support this podcast and keep this podcast running. Now, as an example of the seeds that we've sown as part of this club over this last week, we've sown some radicchio, which is a beautiful plant, I have to say. A red, white, almost lettuce-type plant with a really bitter taste to it, and I absolutely loved. And we also have some parsley that we sowed. Parsley is well known to be sown on the longest days, and you can harvest it into the winter. So we've sown some of that as well. With all these spaces starting to appear on our allotment or in our vegetable garden, it has given us room to sow some of these seeds. Now, if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then please head to our website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, to find out more and hopefully sign up. We'd love to have you there. Now let's get back to the gardening. Well, I'm back in the kitchen garden now, and as I look out across my kitchen garden, I can see we've got cabbages forming, we've got tomatoes forming, just harvested some peas, we've got some keltis, which is looking fantastic. Basically, got lots of crops that are coming along really, really nicely. But one of the problems that, of course, we've had over this last week is that it has been really, really quite warm. And this has meant that we've had to spend a lot of time watering the garden. Now, irrigation is something that I'm constantly looking at, and it's something that I think is very, very important for many of us. Plants, of course, need a lot of water in order to grow, in order to survive. But it can also be a very time-consuming job. Now, as a general rule, I don't like to use a hose pipe. I don't like to use mains water. So I use lots of water from water butts that I've spoken about many times in the past. I fill up my watering cans and I water the garden using those. And this is quite a time-consuming job because it can take an hour every day to do my garden if I really wanted to do it well. One of the biggest problems that I see many gardeners do is they don't water the garden thoroughly. They might go out there for 5 minutes with the hose pipe and just sprinkle water on. That's not good. You really want the water to go down deep. And this has led me to a route that I've thought about taking for quite a while on how I can set up irrigation systems in my garden a little bit better. Of course, I've got the pump system onto the veggie pods, which is working rather well, I have to say. And every morning it comes on for 15 minutes, waters my veggie pods. In the greenhouse, of course, I've got my auto pot systems, which are keeping my cucumbers and tomatoes and chilies and aubergines in the greenhouse growing fantastically well. I have to say they're actually some of my best plants this year. And this is kind of where I have thought about heading when it comes down to the irrigation. Autopots do something called the Aqua Box Straight, which is basically the autopot reservoir attached to their float valve, which goes into a little box, and then a piece of material which acts as a wick is spread out about a metre to irrigate the ground. Well, I bought one of these and I set it up over the weekend. It was pretty easy to set up, actually. It only took me a few seconds. And my plan is I'm just going to trial the one in one of my small but long beds that is growing beans in. And I just want to see how well that actually does, how well it copes with keeping that soil, that compost, hydrated all the time. Now, the idea being that as long as the reservoir is full of water, that bed should have all the water it needs. I'm quietly hoping this is going to work rather well. As you know, I'm a big fan of autopots. They've not paid me anything for this, but I do have an affiliate code for them. But since I've moved on to the autopot system in the greenhouse, and even last year when we trialled it, I have been so impressed with autopots that I'm kind of looking to expand and continue using them in whatever way I can. Purely because, well, I think it makes sense. I want to make my time more available for doing the stuff that I want to get on and do. And something like watering, although it's not exactly a hard job, it's something that does take quite a bit of time. Now, this does lead me on to something that I brought, or ordered rather, from Gardeners World Live. And it was from Ryobi. Ryobi actually had a store at Gardeners World Live, which is the first time I've actually seen them at any event. And I went along, they were doing a show discount, which made it worthwhile. I brought myself a stick pump. Now, this is battery operated, using, of course, the batteries that I have in my system that power my lawnmower, my chainsaw, my drill. Everything that I use now is Ryobi because the same battery does a wide range of tools. Or rather, I've got 6 batteries now. But what this stick pump is basically a water pump on the end of a stick. So I can stick it into my water butt. It will reach right down to the bottom. It'll pump water up. And I can use that to either fill up my reservoirs, my pumps. Basically something I'm trying to do more of is pump water around, but I could also use it and attached to a hose pipe to water the garden as well. So this sort of saves the time when it does come to giving our plants that good watering, where the auto pots aren't going to be. It means that this water pump will just pump the water into a hose pipe that I can then spray around the garden onto the beds where it needs. Now, of course, when we're trying to be efficient with watering, we still want it to be in the right areas. We still want to dedicate the water to the areas that it really needs. So it's still a case of being conservative, but it means that our beds will get a proper watering. Now, one of the ways I always find to tell if your beds are getting a proper watering is that if you dig down a couple of centimetres and it's still dry, the water hasn't penetrated into the soil, and that's what you really want. Often, and I said this earlier, when people just sprinkle a bit of water around the soil, around the beds, when you dig down, it doesn't penetrate the soil. It just sort of covers the top. And that can lead to evaporation and things like that, which is not good. That's not what we want at all. So I'm hoping this water pump is just going to make my watering a little bit more efficient, a little bit better. And my plants are going to thrive for it. And of course, being battery operated, I can take it down the allotment and use it down there as well. So lots and lots of advantages to it. Now, in terms of harvesting, of course, we've already mentioned peas and other things that we are harvesting. We've got raspberries and tayberries and cucumbers and tomatoes. But I've also harvested my garlic and my onions from this home plot. Now, in comparison to what we had down on the allotment, not as good. We had 6 varieties of garlic that I've grown here at home, and they were not as big. I have to admit, I did plant the garlic much closer together here at home, and the bulbs were not as big as I would like. They're still usable, they're still perfectly good, but I would like to see bigger bulbs. Now, again, this could be down to the fact that we did have that dry spring, and I do think that's been a big factor, but also planting them so close was a bit of a problem as well. Now, this leads me down to the fact that what I think we're going to have to do, or something I'm going to be doing in the future, is instead of growing all my garlic in one area, I'm going to spread it out and do a bit more of a multi-pronged approach at growing garlic and other plants in more of a mixed bedding. Rather than having a bed for brassicas or beans and peas, I'm going to try and just mix it up a little bit more here at home, just to make things look a little bit different. But one of the big things that I also discovered with growing my garlic this year, one of the varieties that I've grown is a garlic bulb that I bought from a supermarket. And I simply planted that bulb in the ground. Didn't do anything different to how I normally plant my garlic, just planted that garlic in the ground and let it grow. Well, it worked. We did get garlic from it, not as big as some of the others, but in some cases bigger than certain varieties. The Casablanca I grow, which always does badly here, that was the worst, the smallest bulbs. The supermarket variety did grow bigger than that, but it worked. We were able to grow garlic from a bulb bought from the supermarket. It worked, so I'm pleasantly pleased with that. I reckon if we keep experimenting with this, we might actually find that if we give it more water, it might have done much better. So I'm going to carry on this experiment next year as well. But I'm very, very pleased that supermarket garlic did grow. Not something I was expecting, to be honest with you. Right, I am going to head on into the podding shed now, and I've had a couple of emails and a bit of conversation, funnily enough, about weeding. So come meet me in there. In the meantime, let's find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe. And this week we have broad beans on toast with burrata, parma ham, mint and chilli. I only got a small harvest of broad beans this year, and just enough for the one meal, so I wanted to make it a special one. And for me that means keeping things simple and letting the ingredients shine. So I came up with this week's recipe, and for me it's a perfect weekend lunch dish for eating outdoors with a glass of something cold. So let's not delay and head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need, and it serves two, 180 grams of double podded broad beans, but if using homegrown, they are so sweet you can skip this step. I just think it looks better in the final dish. And then you will need one finely diced shallot, about 30 grams, 5 grams of chopped fresh mint, the zest and juice of a quarter lemon, 10 grams of chopped red chilli, a drizzle of olive oil, 2 burrata cheeses, 4 slices of parma ham, and 2 thick slices of toasted sourdough. Method. In rapidly boiling water, cook the broad beans for no longer than 1 minute. When cooked, immediately chill in ice water. And once cooled, you can now double pod them by popping them out of the shells, or you can skip this step. Now mix them together with the shallots, lemon, mint and chilli and a drizzle of olive oil, and then toast the bread and assemble by breaking open the burrata on top of the toast, then topping with the parma ham, and then spooning over the bean mix. And then enjoy. And that's it from me this week.
Well, once again, another delicious recipe from Chef Scott there. Now, weeds. Not exactly the most glamorous subject, but it's something that has popped up quite a few times over this last week for me. Now, it started out in our front garden. As you know, I've got a driveway in our front garden, which we are looking to get resurfaced and redone. But I have several pots out there which need quite a bit of care. But our biggest problem has been the actual driveway itself. We're getting lots of weeds that are coming up through the gravel, through the cracks. And these weeds include mare's tail. Now, the mare's tail was in our neighbour's garden, but they had theirs resurfaced maybe 2 years ago. And the mare's tail has expanded and moved into our garden, which is a bit of a problem. Mare's tail is a particularly difficult weed to get rid of, but we've been looking at getting our driveway resurfaced anyway and things like that, because it is just so difficult to keep on top of the weeds. They grow in the cracks in the paving, in the gravel, just very, very tricky. But well, my wife particularly, she was out there clearing away some of these weeds. One of our neighbours came up to her and said that they're also getting raspberries coming through into their garden, which are from mine. Our raspberries. Now, raspberries, again, they have this particular habit that they grow underground and they spread runners, which have a particularly invasive effect. Just like mare's tail, just like couch grass, they have this effect where they can pod out runners. And of course, it's affected my neighbours, which I'm not happy with. I don't want to affect my neighbours. I love my raspberries. I grow lots of raspberries, but I need to contain them. And I thought I'd grown them in a way that would contain them, but clearly not. We do actually get runners popping up in our garden as well, but I normally just pull them out as soon as I see them. The fact it's affected my neighbours, bit of a problem once again. Now, added to that, I also received an email this week from Courtney, and Courtney says, "Hi Richard, my name is Courtney and I'm a new gardener as of this year. I'm still finding my feet managing my beds and growing a lot in containers. However, the beds I do have and my garden in general have a big knotweed issue. This is coming from my neighbour's garden that is very neglected. I feel like I'm getting rid of at least a bin bag a day, and overnight it just appears again. I don't use pesticides and prefer organic treatments for pests and soil treatment, but I'm at my wit's end with it. Any advice regarding this would be fantastic. I love your podcast and I've been listening every week, even working my way through your previous episodes and making a note of the tips and tricks you offer. Many thanks." And you know, this is one of the problems. Knotweed is a particularly nasty weed. It does have this horrible spreading habit, especially when you move the foliage, its roots, its rhizomes then expand and grow more. And this is one of the problems with knotweed. Unfortunately, you could keep trying to remove all the foliage, you could cover it over, and in a few years you might eventually exhaust it enough. You've got to, if you want to get on top of knotweed, you've got to keep on top of it almost every day to try and remove it. It is a very, very difficult. If you are persistent, consistent, you should do it, but it will take a long time. Now, one of the problems with knotweed is that it is well known for being a particularly bad weed. And often you find that if you have knotweed in your garden, I believe in an allotment as well, you have to let your local council know and they will come and deal with it. And this often means that they use weed killer. Now, I admit I am not a lover of using weed killer. I don't like the idea of using it. But I'm not against the use of it. I believe that weed killer has a place in extreme circumstances. And this is one of those extreme circumstances that doesn't feel comfortable with me, but knotweed, unfortunately, can be particularly difficult. And one of the problems I believe with knotweed as well is because it is so difficult, it can actually damage buildings. So you could go the long persistent route, which is probably what I would do, constantly trying to remove the foliage, stay on it every day, but it will take a long time. And it's the same with all the other weeds, the raspberries, everything else. It takes a long time and you've got to stay on top of it every day. But if you do want to go down the council route, let them know and they'll come out and deal with it. As I understand it, it's a very specialised weed killer for knotweed as well, but it's not one that we can easily buy. It's ultra strong, etc., etc. So it needs specialist treatment. It's not one I've had to deal with either, but there's a lot of talk about knotweed. So, and the regulations are the council need to deal with it. So if you do have knotweed, let your council know. They may not be able to do anything, or they may have to take certain action. So it's been an interesting week with that. I've also received another email, and this time it was from a Tanya, and she started listening to the podcast last year, and this year I've inspired her to give growing her own vegetables a go again. Last year I actually managed to find a spot in my large garden that wasn't shady, but I was able to grow tomato plants with success that was given to me by a neighbour. This year I took out the seeds out of cherry tomatoes from the shops and brought some courgette seedlings. I managed to start them off in Ferrero Rocher container indoors, and then put them into little pots and brought them into my little greenhouse. I also brought an aubergine plant to be daring from the summer fete. Fingers crossed I keep on top of the watering and have a good yield to make one of those favourite recipes, beautiful courgettes from the Jamie Oliver website. Thank you again for your knowledge and inspiration. You're very welcome, Tanya. She's actually followed up and sent me some few photos of her garden, and we've gone back and forth with a few ideas and a few suggestions of how to deal with the shady garden. It can be a bit of a problem, but you'd be surprised just how much does grow in a shady garden. Peas, raspberries, you name it. You just got to sometimes think out the side of the box and be a bit experimental. So thank you very much for that email as well. I do love it when we get emails. They really do help shape the podcast and give us a lot of information. If you do want to get in touch, my email address is richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Now, of course, the thing that I really want from you is to leave a rating or a comment on your podcast provider. I've said many times already, it really does help shape this podcast and give us a lot of information that helps feed into the algorithms that get us found by more people. And we've had a couple of comments come in on Spotify, both from Lynn. Now, first of all, she says on episode 609, which was the garlic hot composting and allotment battles episode, she says, "Hi Richard, well, after listening to you talk about using straw as a mulch, I finally went and brought a pail, and I'll let you know how it goes. Can't remember if you've ever talked about it, tried perennial brassicas, and just wanted to share with you I've been harvesting from an Austrian tree cabbage and keeper perennial kale. So easy, and crops are fantastic. Just pick a few leaves when I need them. Highly recommended, Lynn." I have to admit, I have tried some perennial cabbage, I believe it was, but the seeds failed. So it's something I want to try again, some more perennial food crops, So I may have to get some more seeds of those in the not too distant future. Now, on last week's episode, Lynn says that was the Gardener's World Live, which I've had a lot of people actually come out and say they've really enjoyed, actually. So Lynn also says, great podcast, Richard, one of your best. Listening to the description of the Nectary Garden was absolutely mesmerising. I didn't feel I missed out by not actually seeing it. Chop and drop is definitely a way forward, makes total sense, but I was especially taken with the discussion regarding mental health and gardening. It really is for me and so many other people so precious. I'm glad we talk about subjects like this more openly now. Gardening is my therapy, Lynn. Yes, I'm so glad we talk about mental health and gardening more openly. I believe it is something that we should talk about a lot more. I think it is something that, well, just needs to be discussed more openly, and not just the fact that gardening can help, but I think also discussing about mental health and just being honest about it. You know, I know there's a lot of people that turn their eyes or roll their eyes when they hear about mental health, but I'm sorry, it is important. Now, added to that, Anna Jones on YouTube, she also left a comment about the Gardener's World episode, and she also said it's one of the best. So I'm very pleased that you enjoyed that, Anna. Please do let me know what it was that you enjoyed so much about the episode, because I really enjoyed putting last week's episode together. I enjoyed putting them all together, but last week's one I really did enjoy, and it's nice to get out and about. Well, that is coming to the end of this week's podcast, but please do leave a rate and review. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you want to support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Supporters Club. And details on that at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, which is, of course, our website. You can, of course, leave a comment on the end of a blog post. You can also leave us a voicemail while on our website. And, of course, you can email me, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Don't forget you can follow us on social media. Please do give us a like and a follow on social media platforms. We're on pretty much every platform at the moment. But it's always good to boost those up because unfortunately that's where most people see things these days. Right guys, with that, it's time to get out of here. I will be back again next time where I've got an exciting project. If everything falls into place, I've got a really exciting project to talk about next week, which I will reveal next week. Until then, please take care.